Music is a mentorship, mentee-mentor way of learning. And students need that connection, that real heartfelt connection with an artist, with a music teacher, art teacher, who really is going to serve as a mentor. That communication, that relationship is the critical thing that was missing. Because if you have a student who's got something to express, and you've got an adult, an older adult, who can bring that out, that's a very, very special relationship. DeWitt White was an immensely talented young man. A friend of the family called me and said, I have a friend who has a son who can't get him away from this keyboard. Could he come to Mind Builders and study? He needs to study. He's just full of music. My class was full at the time, so I assigned him to another teacher. On a Saturday, I had to sub for that teacher. So I had my direct experience with DeWitt. And so the lesson was going okay, but as I was leaving, he played part of a Beethoven piano sonata that he learned by ear. Of course, I turned around, went back to him, and said, how did you learn that? This is one of the more difficult Beethoven piano sonatas. How did you learn it? I heard it on the radio, and I played it on my keyboard. I had never encountered someone like that. So I took it as a student. But our relationship was much more than that. Because as I learned more about his personal life and his family life, he needed so much more than a music teacher. He would have 3 or 4 different scores on the music stand at one time. A Beethoven piano sonata, a Bach fugue, maybe a Mozart piano sonata. And he would practice one for a little while and then switch, go to the next one, and then go to the next one, and then go back again. It was extraordinary. He didn't have any training at all. And he had a little small keyboard. He didn't have one of these deluxe keyboards. But he loved it. He was so hungry for it. He would just listen to the radio and pick out these incredibly difficult pieces by Beethoven. Beethoven was his hero because Beethoven's personality was much like DeWitt's personality. Fiery, rebellious, independent, passionate. But he was also a hip-hop kid. So he had the dual identities. He looked like, a hip-hop kid. Baggy pants and the boots and the braids and all of that. But here's this kid who could sit down and play and learn, eventually, a Beethoven piano sonata. Stuff that it would take 10 or 15 years of dedicated study from a young age to get to that point. And he was very interested in fusing his classical yearnings and training with the hip-hop. The two were not separate for him. It was a whole merger of the sort of life-giving musical talent that he had. I think he was 14 when we met. His father was never in his life. His mother was ill with AIDS, a wonderful, wonderful woman. And they had an incredibly close relationship. So, the stress and strain of seeing your mother, ill every day with a disease that is terminal at that time is extremely stressful. Didn't fit into the public school environment because he was so smart that it wasn't nowhere near challenging enough for him. Sometimes he slept on the train. I know that he probably didn't get enough to eat, so we had dinner every night. He had incredible stresses. So it was more than just teaching him music. It was about the relationship that he needed to get him through this situation, to support him through the situation that he was going through. After his mother's death, he was kind of aimless. We tried to get him into LaGuardia. I'm sure he was the most talented pianist audition at that time, but LaGuardia was beginning to move into stressing academics. And so he didn't have the academic grades to get into LaGuardia. He had the talent. And we called, we wrote letters, we fought like hell to get him into that school. So we knew if he was there, he would be safe. But he didn't get there. And the neighborhood school was Evander Childs. Need I say more? Then he got into the group home system, eventually ended up in Staten Island. So we were beginning to see less and less of him because he was so far away. One time I came into Mind Builders and I heard the piano playing. I knew it was him. I hadn't seen him in 2 or 3 weeks. So I went into the room and we had a conversation. And I told him, you gotta stay close here. You gotta stay close here. Because, you've got to be safe. He was with the wrong crowd on Staten Island. DeWitt was not a criminal. He was not a drug dealer. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. And he was murdered, shot in the back in Staten Island.
How old was he?
17. That was the roughest phone call I've ever taken in my entire life. To return that phone call and hear that. When he would play concerts, there'd be audience people there, and he would get up, go to the piano in his boots, baggy pants, braids. I knew those people was like, what is he going to do? What could he do? What's going on here? I wanted them to think that. So when he lunged into Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, they were like, what is this? Don't stereotype him. You have certain expectations that a young man who looks like that cannot possibly play the piano in Wild Recital Hall at Carnegie Hall. But when he touched the keyboard, it was magic. He asked me, do I have to wear a suit? Do I have to wear shoes? No, come as you are. Just be neat, clean, but come as you are. There's no dress code here. I wanted that on purpose because I wanted to break that mold of what is expected of our students, of our kids, especially when they step outside of the community, of our community, and go and play so-called downtown. Break the stereotype, break the code, break it with classical music, break it with a young man who's got more fire than anybody I've ever met at that age. He was that talented and that powerful and that passionate and that driven, where he could merge the classical and the hip hop and the jazz and all of it. Could just be a whole new thing. And he would have been a pioneer in the music industry, for sure. What Miles Davis did with Bitches Brew, what Herbie Hancock did with the fusion. We don't think of it now, but back then it was new. It was like, what is this? Like electric music and jazz together? Really? Now it's accepted. I think DeWitt would have created a whole new genre of classical, hip hop, pop, electronic. So what an inspiration his life is and can be to anybody else who feels that way, who's a hip hop artist and wants the classical and says, how do I blend this? How do I do this? And those are going to be the people who are going to change the whole art scene for the better. Because the emphasis is going to be, how can I touch this person to make them a better human being? That's going to be the new generation that DeWitt could pull out for the entire world.